Wow. I'm an act. My name's Bobby. Before I get going here a little bit, I just want to say to Monique, Makia, and Tony, 28 years ago when we started this thing, I got a call at home, and this cat said that he had just left the treatment center and he wanted to know if he could come to our first convention. And I just want to let the three of you know that on my drive over here this evening, I called Jack C., who has 27 years and change today. First of all, I want to thank the convention committee. This is especially a personal privilege and an honor for me, mostly because, well, I feel a little anxious. I feel very anxious and absolutely excited about being here and celebrating our 25th year together. That's right. Happy birthday, Narcotics Anonymous, silver anniversary! And, clearly feeling somewhat anxious. I mean, it's different speaking in Philly, in your hometown. I mean, my home group is a few miles down the road. Here's a little plug. Wednesday night, 7:30, St. Joseph's University, the 11th step, and then some. Come and join us, please. But when you share in Philadelphia, obviously, people are going to come up to you and say, oh, you did a good job and all that other kind of stuff, and then your real friends are going to critique you, right? And they're going to say you should have shelved the duck story, right? The duck story. But anyway, if you could just bear with me, because there is the GPRCNA is a part of my foundation, and it is a part of my personal recovery. Service is a part of my recovery. One thing that stands out to me more than anything else is that at the very first convention, we had invited out all of the 11 first GSRs. And as a result, when we invited them to the very first convention, and they stood up, recognizing their clean time, all of those GSRs, 10 out of the 11 of them, were all clean since they had started their first meeting, and except one had only relapsed. And that's something pretty powerful and pretty strong to me. That by being in service, I increase the odds for my recovery. Before I get going a little bit, I think it's only fair to share a little bit about how I arrived here at Narcotics Anonymous and give you a little bit of a hint as to why I'm here. And I think it's important to know, for me, that I would hear people share at meetings oftentimes about how we felt different about ourselves, that we just didn't seem to fit in. And there's no doubt about it that even though I never really wanted to admit that, I clearly felt that somewhere, for some reason, I didn't connect with this world. And I think part of it was, for me, was not only didn't I connect with this world, but I felt like the world had to make the adjustment. I wasn't ready to compensate. And I can remember all the way back, after we're clean for a little while, our family has a tendency to tell us things about ourselves that we oftentimes don't here until the anguish and the pain has diminished. You know, they talk a lot about those things in our lives that we did that hurt them. And there's no doubt about it that I caused a lot of anguish and pain through the ones that love me. And I would remember my mother would say that not too long ago in a conversation how she had my brother, and my brother, you know, came out, was a happy baby, slept all through the night, had no problems being fed. And then she would look at me and said, and then when I had Bobby, it was like having 10 kids. My grandmother used to tell the story when I was a little baby, how I would hold my breath until I turned blue in the face when I didn't get what I wanted. And then she would talk about how I would stand at the top of the steps arguing when I couldn't get exactly what I needed, and I would threaten to jump. My grandmother would be at the bottom of the steps going, Marie, 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 please, just give him what he wants, just give him what he wants. And my mother would be at the top of the steps and go, jump, jump, go ahead, jump. You know, what was it about me that I just feel like I couldn't connect to this world? You know, what made me feel so different? And I don't have an answer for that. And I know that I've learned in Narcotics Anonymous, it really doesn't matter. You know, what really matters is, what am I doing about it today? What is this daily reprieve giving me information? What kind of surrender do I have today to combat this inherent illness, you know, that lies within me? And, you know, my addiction took off at a very early age. You know, when I found drugs, you know, was my way out. Covered the pain, it helped me run, it helped me get away from everything that seemed to matter. It allowed me to say to everybody and everything in this world, just leave me alone. You know, just don't touch me anymore, man, just leave me alone. And that desperation, that pain of that addiction, you know, hung with me and made surrender so difficult. I mean, since the time I was 13 years old, I had been sent to mental health professionals. You know, apparently my insanity, you know, was so rich in hurting people's lives that nobody knew what to do. And it became apparent to me, you know, through my early teens, that when I found heavy narcotics, that was a place that I wasn't going to leave. And that pain and that destruction, you know, was someplace that I felt I had to stay. I truly believe that I surrendered to Narcotics Anonymous the day before I died. My addiction had taken me to places, like all of us, that we never wanted to travel. And in that, and in enduring that whole time, I couldn't stop using. And as early as 1973, I was transferred from, I was facing 2 to 5 at Yarville State Penitentiary. I was transferred to PA and introduced to my first Narcotics Anonymous meeting in Pennsylvania. And even then, I remember going to that meeting and hearing somebody share. For the first time in my life, I began to connect to this message. This message began to mean something to me. I really began to get a spark of hope. I really began to feel the life that he was sharing about. And as hard as I wanted to really believe that that life was for me as well, I just couldn't stop. You know, I'll go on record as saying that I love narcotics more than anybody else in the world. I mean, that's how I felt. You know, it cured my ills, it cured my pain, it made me wake up and talk on the telephone, you know, to do any business during the course of the day I needed to use. And it got to be very painful. I was in a detox not too far from here. And I remember one evening, a beautiful redhead came in a straitjacket. She had just inherited $883,000. And I thought to myself, now that's my kind of woman. And within 6 months, this housewife who just wanted to die started shooting dope with me. And I used to say, Linda, who kept wanting to die, I would always say, why would you want to die if you can get high? I mean, to me, that parallel was consistent. You know, what was the difference? You know, and it turned, you know, I ended up, you know, I would use a soup ladle to cook my dope. Take all my clothes off, start at my neck, work my way down to my ankles. When I did find a vein, I would tape it with masking tape, hold it there, because I knew in a few hours I'd have to do it all over again. For a long time, I always felt that I was doomed to be a dope fiend, and that was just my destiny. And I actually grew okay with that. I actually got to a place where I believed that there was nothing else in my life. There was nothing else that I could do. And as a result, through all those trials and tribulations, through all the pain and anguish, you know, there came that day. There came that day when both either I was receptive enough or somebody said the right thing to me to help me surrender. You know, and I was at a meeting not too long ago, and this cat says to me, he goes, you still coming around? And I thought to myself, that's a peculiar question. I mean, how could I not be still coming around? You know, Narcotics Anonymous took me from the fires of hell and brought me to this place with you. From the depths of despair. It was in here, in Narcotics Anonymous, that you showed me how to live. It's here where every day with that morning reprieve, I get that opportunity to move myself from self-centeredness to God-centeredness. Knowing that if I wake up and if I roll out with all those inherent challenges, that impulsivity, those obsessions, that desire to manipulate, that need to create safety and security in my life, and control, that until I work this program, I will use. So how can anybody say, why would you still be coming around? Is there any other place I can go? Is there any other place I should be? I mean, this is where I'm afforded the nurturing, the love, the affection, the information, the warmth, the caring, and the concern. In the depths of my despair, I built my character with you in Narcotics Anonymous. There isn't another place in the world that I could, you know, I've not gone, I can I can honestly say more than 10 days without a meeting. And I'll be clean, June 3rd, God willing, I'll be clean 29 years. I wouldn't even think about going that long without a meeting. And you know, a few weeks ago, and this is what it means to me. A few weeks ago, I was in Dallas for business, and whenever on Wednesday night my home group meets, I always make sure I make a meeting, whatever city I'm in. And we were at a business dinner, and there was, of course, non-recovering people with me, and I said to them I'd have to excuse myself a little early tonight because, you know, I had a split. And they asked me what it was about, and there was these two cats a woman, an elderly woman and a younger man, and they'd asked me specifics, and I told them, because they just seemed to feel like that. Do you know what I mean? They weren't addicts, but they just seemed to know. And we went out to the meeting. I took them with me. They had a great time. Everything was shocking, unbelievable. They couldn't believe the love and the affection that was grown out of these rooms. And we were driving back from the meeting, and I was parking the car. We were walking across the street to enter into the lobby, and a middle-aged woman who had seen me walked over toward me, and I'm sure we've all done this a million times, and with her dignity robbed, with only one shoe on her foot, she said, "Excuse me, sir, but would you please help me out? I was just released out of jail 1 hour ago. And it's $7 a night to stay at the Salvation Army, and I just don't have any money." And it was a cold evening in Dallas that night. It had been in the 30s, unusually. And I reached in my pocket and you know, gave her whatever cash I had. And Doris, this beautiful woman from Seattle, leaned over to me. She's ruffling through her pocketbook, and she hands me a note. And I don't know if it was a 20, a 50, or 100. But she asked me to give it to her. And then she lifted this beautiful cashmere scarf off of her neck and placed it around this woman. Tied a little knot. And I watched as one tear fell out of her eye. She put the scarf to her face and said, "I've never smelled anything so beautiful as that." And I turned to Doris and said, you know, as we were walking away, I said, "That was awfully generous and kind of you." And she looked at me and said, "Was there anything else I could do after going to that meeting of Narcotics Anonymous?" That's the love. You know, we can penetrate things that's out there that nobody else anywhere can penetrate. I promised the committee that I would, there's one thing I gotta say, you know, what makes me, that I think is important for me to always focus in on, and I hope that I can share this with you tonight. Because that's an example of charity, of goodwill, which I really believe is a spiritual principle, and that's what Narcotics Anonymous is about. And if you really think about it, every meeting that we go to, most all the meetings that we hit, they always read how it works. And there's one line in how it works that is so profound. And think about what it says. A simple line that just states that there is one thing more than anything else Not on the top 10 list, not in the top 20, not 1, 2, or 3, but there's one thing more than anything else that will defeat us in our recovery. And that is an indifference and intolerance of spiritual principles. I said a little prayer before I came up here, and it's a simple prayer. I say it any time before I share, and it just simply goes like this. Please, dear God, put the love in my heart, the words in my mouth, and please keep me honest. And since Dutch isn't here tonight, I don't have to worry about being honest. I'll have to let Mary and Sharon. In 1982, to go back a little bit, we were part of the Mid-Atlantic region, which consumes 7 states up in the Northeast and part of a little bit of the Midwest through Ohio. And it was obvious to me, and maybe a couple other members at the time, that we just didn't have the political juice that we needed. So we needed to create a region for World Services. EGO. As a result, we got a group of people together, and we reformed this area and made it into a region. And it was Montgomery, Bucks, Delaware County, Philadelphia, the entire state of Delaware, and South Jersey from Trenton south. So once we got started shortly after that as a region, it was, we decided that both Atlanta and Miami were getting ready to have their first regional convention. And, you know, Philly, this is the second oldest service structure in the world. And here's another plug. What's happening in 2013, baby? Where's it going to be? No, where is 2013 World Convention going to be? In what city? That's our city, right? So here we are. 30 days before, 30 days out from the start of the first convention, and a few of us are at the regional meeting. I think I was in ASR, and we had just had nominations. So I put a motion out there because I know that I wanted to make sure that Philly would be saying 28, but we've had a few mistakes, that's okay. Just so we could stay ahead of Atlanta and Miami, because it was deservingly so. I mean, we had the second oldest structure. I was reading in my basement, I got boxes and boxes of junks. And I was reading a letter that was sent to actually our first banquet speaker at the very first convention, Brian T. And he wrote to Jimmy Kinnan. And in it says, thank you for getting in touch with us. This was in 1972. We're really interested in knowing what you guys are doing. We finally put together a world directory, and we have almost 20 meetings. Today, we have almost 70,000 Narcotics Anonymous meetings. And think about how all that happens. That's just one addict helping another. It's that simple, one addict helping another. From 20 groups. In Iran, they have 300,000 members. In Iran. So here we are at this newly formed regional meeting, And I throw a motion that we need to have a Philly convention. And the chairperson, Jane G., looks at me and says, "You must be out of your mind. We got $60 in the treasury. We haven't even paid the rent." And you know, in business meetings, when decorum and civility and persuasiveness seems to fail, you know, you just use muscle, right? I mean, it's the only way to get it done. And I looked at everybody and I said, well, we're going to have a convention whether you want to or not. And Johnny Swanson stood up, handed me $100. Dutch handed me $100. I threw in $100. And then we looked at each other and said, now what the hell do we do? So, you know, they opened up Atlantic City not too long before that. Jumped in our car, we argued the whole way down to the shore as to whether or not, when we got to the roulette table, would we put it on red or black. Now, the story gets a little foggy from here, and I'm glad Dutch isn't here to refute anything I have to say, because I picked the right color. And not only that, once we hit, so we had $500 to put it down, a deposit down at the Society Inn Hotel on 4th and Orange. He argued with me that let's double down, split the rest. The fundraising tasks of our second convention were even worse, and I don't really want to have to get into that because I don't want to embarrass ourselves or anybody else, but we really didn't know what we were doing, and I'm like totally, unbelievably shocked that here we are 25 years later. And all of those committees, and I thank God for all of the committees and all the service work and the people that have committed and sacrificed their time day and night, making calls, going to meetings, handing out flyers, tackling registrations, collecting funds, and doing it with the same care and love and concern that Narcotics Anonymous teaches all of us. For one reason, not for self, but for others. You know, this is for all of us. Each one of us here tonight is part of that link, part of that chain that has made this now embedded in this community. At the second convention, it was called A Time to Come Together. And I remember at the conclusion of the convention, I went and met with the hotel staff because we were really interested in establishing Narcotics Anonymous within the community. You know, it was the first time we started to get a history in Philadelphia with hotels. It became really important that the city recognized that we were a reliable group, a gracious group, a loving group, and it was worth their business. And I walk into this post-convention meeting, and the general manager's there, and the sales team is there, and I'm neatly dressed and trying to look responsible, and all of a sudden, you know, as I'm thanking the hotel for the wonderful job they did, cutting the last, giving them, we did everything in cash those days, giving them the last monies of cash to shore up the bill. The security guy walks into the office with this open UPS box and throws it right into the center of the table. And he starts pulls out a lamp, pulls out a telephone, pulls out sheets, pulls out pillows, pulls out a blanket, and then pulls out a note. And on the note it reads, "To whom it may concern, I was traveling back to New York after the convention, and I was with my sponsor who said to me, 'What are you doing with all that shit in the trunk? You need to turn that back.' And because I'm trying to live and change my way of life, I'm sending you back everything I took from your room." Needless to say, I was totally knocked out. I thought, what a representation of what we do around here, man. How, I was filled with gratitude, totally filled with the fact that we had done this and that he had taken accountability and responsibility, and his sponsorship that helped him see that. The hotel staff, on the other hand, especially the security guard, he didn't want to hear about it. He wanted to track his name down and find out the UPS thing. The fact that we're here together, and this is now, our silver anniversary, one could safely say that Narcotics Anonymous will reside in Philadelphia and be forever lasting. How can this chain of events be any different than what it is today? It's unbelievable that I've never missed a Philly convention. There's been times when I've only been able to pop in. I've been to all 25, and I can't think of any place else, especially now that it's held on Easter weekend, which actually helps me be them with you. And I want to keep this link going. I wanted to make sure that those of you that don't participate in conventions, that have never had that experience, or have never had that opportunity to serve Narcotics Anonymous, just think about one thing, and that is at our very first convention, all of those original GSRs are still clean today. For my recovery and for you to continue to help me, we need you here, and we need you in service, and we need you to be fulfilled with everything that Narcotics Anonymous can give you. Thanks for letting me share.